The last key behavior that we talk about with parabolas is your x-intercepts, which, hey, it's where it crosses. I'm sure you guessed the x-axis. What? It's when y equals 0. Yeah. So not my best parabolas ever, but hopefully you can forgive me. It's where it crosses the x-axis. It's when y equals 0. And that can mean, unlike initial value, that's like a good overarching umbrella of what the y-intercept is. Your x-intercepts can mean a lot of different things because it really depends on what y is. When y equals 0, if it's height, well, then it's when your height goes down to 0. So it could be where the ball starts, and it starts at 0 when time is 0. Or maybe it's where the ball ends, that it went up and came back down, and now the height's at 0, so it's where the ball hit the ground. Or maybe if we're talking about revenue, because revenue would be a multiplication of number of units sold and price per unit, right? So if your revenue is going to be, okay, number of units times price of unit, and you've got a parabola that represents that, of, okay, well, if I set the price of the unit at 0, then obviously my revenue is going to be 0. But also, if I set my price at 200, and according to this equation, 200 would bring me back down to 0, then it means I'm not making any money when I set my price at 200. So it could mean a lot of different things, but it really depends on what y represents. And it's when y goes to 0. So think about what that means in the context of the situation. This guy is just a little bit more difficult to find because it's called your 0 in the calculator. 0. It's the first option because it's like, we're pretty sure we know what you want to get. X-intercepts is a big deal, so we think you're going to want to do the 0. And so they made it the most easily accessible one of all of these options. Realize that you have to do them one at a time. So when you hit 0, and yes, I'm doing it for the blue graph, I can't just highlight all of the x-intercepts because it will only give me one at a time. So notice that it shifted over from this x-intercept to go over to this x-intercept. It doesn't give me both. So you need to make sure to encompass only one, and then you have to, go back and do it again. Like this one's a little bit more specific, right? Notice that when you start to do all of this stuff, it all gets on top of each other. So remember, you can click till it pinches and then move it over. Click, hold till it pinches and then move it over so you can read more. And so that's how you find your x-intercepts. Cool. Something that we get asked to do a lot with graphs is to sketch a graph. Okay, so when we're sketching a graph, we need to remember some of the key things. You always need to scale and label your axes. Always. That is something you always need to do. In most IB problems, if they ask you to graph something and you've just scaled and labeled your axis, you get 1 point, which is great. Grab that 1 point, take it with you for the ride, right? So just scale and label your axes, easy 1 point. Some other things that you need to make sure that you do. Show the shape accurately. You need to show that you know that this is supposed to be a parabola. Don't connect your x-intercepts and your vertex with 2 lines because that looks like an absolute value function, not a parabola. We know that parabolas should be curved, so make sure that you show that. Okay. Make sure that you label any axes intercepts. Label axes, plural of axis, so ES, intercepts. All x-intercepts, all y-intercepts, label them. Put a point there, put what the coordinate is, and make sure that you label them out. Also, label coordinates of vertex. So wherever your behavior changes, label the point at which that changes because you've just found the maximum area or maybe the maximum height, right? So you need to make sure that you show that that's an important thing. All right. So what we're going to do is we are going to sketch this on this piece of paper. My number one recommendation, along with many other number one recommendations, is that you first plot it in your calculator. Because your calculator you can have with you at all times, and so why not use it to your advantage? Okay, so that's going to be negative 0.5 x squared plus 7.5 x minus 18. I'm going to hit menu, zoom, standard first. That's always the first thing I do. I notice that it's a little bit bigger, so I might do menu, zoom, and I'm going to go to fit and see what happens. And then I'm like, oh, that's not super helpful because I'm still missing the other x-intercept, and now things look a little skewed. However, remember with TI Inspires, if you click and hold on a white space, so here I'm in a white space with my mouse, click and hold, it turns into this, like it looks like you're grabbing a sheet or something, and you can just shift it over. Yeah. So then now I have all of those things that I know are important. Axes intercepts, x-intercepts, y-intercepts, right? Vertex. That's about it. So I'm going to grab those values here, and then I'm going to start plotting them here. I want to show you a cool trick, is that if you do trace, graph trace, it'll automatically lock on to things like your zeros, right? You know that you're around there. Wait till this shows up and it's like, hey, that's your 0. And then down here, it will tell you the point. 3, 0. Cool. 3, 0. And then I can scroll over and it's like, hey, that's your y-intercept. Well, that happens at 0, negative 18. Sometimes it does it with your vertex. It says, hey, maximum. There you go. You're welcome. Sometimes it doesn't. So if it doesn't show up, then you have to go in and actually say, hey, I want to know my maximum. Please tell me. And then it will. But it can do with the trace as well. And then I'm going to go find my other x-intercept, and that's going to be 12, 0. So now I just wrote down these guys, so because I didn't plot them on the graph, so I've got them all written down, and now I know I need to encompass those. I went ahead and already did the math, but I'll tell you what I do when I do the math. I noticed that the graph is to the right, yeah? So that means I don't really care, like the maximum is to the right. I don't really care about what's going on in the negative, mostly. So I'm not going to graph that, which means I'm going to move my y-axis as far left on this graph as I want to. On my graph that I originally sketched, I put it here, just one in. I think for right now, I'm going to move it over to be at the edge because it doesn't matter because we don't care about what's going on because the vertex isn't on the other side. All the behaviors that we care about are happening on the right side of the y-axis. Then I need to look at how tall I'm going. I know that I want to represent my y-intercept, which happens at negative 18. And I know I want to represent my vertex, which is how tall it's going to get, which is at 10.1, which means I need to span from negative 18 to 10.1, 28 value points, right? I need to go up 28. So I go ahead and count. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And 15, if I multiply that by 2, would be 30, which would encompass 28, right? So if I go by 2s on every one of these tick marks, then I will have enough to cover all of my 28 because it's a little bit more. 30 is a little bit more than 28, so we're good. Hopefully that made sense. I'll try and remember to keep going with that type of explanation if you need. So I know that would be 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, 0 would be right here. And then we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. Perfect. Make sure to scale and label your axes. Right now, all we're talking about is X and Y. So done. And I know I want to go up by 2s on these guys. So I do 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. I want to be able to encompass a 3 and a 12 as my intercepts. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I don't have enough to go to 12 here. If I'd go by 1s, so I'll go by 2s instead. Okay. Now I just go in and plot those points, right? So 0, negative 18. I know that I need to label my intercepts. So I'll say, hey, that's 0, negative 18. 3, 0. Actually, that's going to be in the way of my curve. So I should make sure it's to the side. 12, 0. And then 7.5. Here's 7. Here's 7.5. And then goes all the way up to 10.1, which is just barely over 10. I know I need to label the vertex as well, so I'll do 7.5, comma 10.1. And then I need to make sure I show the shape. I need to show that I know uh, what the shape is going to be like. Sorry, I just had a brain fart there for a second. So I know it's supposed to be curvy, curved-ish. And as long as I represented those key values, I know that it should be somewhere over here. I'm assuming it's supposed to be there. I can kind of figure out symmetry from the intercepts, but oh, sorry, you can't see that. Yeah, but as long as I've labeled those points that we really care about well, then it's fine.